Today I'll show you a tool called the Star of Awareness, and it's a simple act-based framework that reveals why you get stuck and how to move forward with clarity. So if you've ever wondered, why can't I do the things I know that are important, this video will finally help you make sense of that. If you're new to this channel, welcome to Act on Mental Health. My name is Sean Hardy, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor based here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I'm a therapist who works with clients every day. And I use ACT, or Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, to help people with a range of issues from anxiety, depression, and ADHD. Now, in the last video, we talked about what your funeral will reveal about your values and how you lived your life. People will remember your values, not your symptoms. And we need to keep that in mind. But here's the problem. Knowing what matters isn't enough. There's a breakdown that happens between knowing your values and actually living your values. So we're going to talk about that today using the Star of Awareness. So we're going to go over to the whiteboard and I'll show you how this works. So I'm going to write out a 5-point star. And in this star, we have 5 questions that we want to walk through. So we're going to look at what, that. The third question is when, how, and this one we're going to put stop. So these are the 5 questions for these 5 points. Now the center of this is the most important question, which is why. This is where values and motivation and a sense of deeper meaning is connected. So we're going to walk through this using one universal value of parenting. So let's walk through this. So point number 1 at the top here is what was important? This is the priority question. So in our value of parenting, let's use an example such as bedtime. Now it's bedtime and the kids need to wind down and we need to get their pajamas on and we need to settle into our routine. But what needs to happen? Well, we need a predictable bedtime routine so that they can help better regulate the next day. Now, if what isn't important, your brain is going to prioritize whatever screams the loudest at that moment. So whether that's stress, your kids, your own frustration, or maybe that internal noise that shows up instead of the real priority. So what's the skill that's needed here? Well, we need to clarify in advance our priorities. What actually matters right now? Now let's move on to the second point. Did you know that it was important? Now this is the responsibility question. And a lot of breakdown happens here when we don't assign who is responsible or we don't know that we're responsible to do something. Now you may know what matters and the priority is getting the kids in bed. But did I know in the moment that this was my responsibility? So let's use another example. I'll use a personal example of making dinner on Mondays. So that's my responsibility. So I planned spaghetti and meatballs, and I know there's 3 basic things I need: spaghetti, meatballs, and marinara sauce, and maybe some bread for toast. Now, if you remember that this is yours to do, then everything runs smoothly. If you don't remember, if that awareness is not clicking, then you might get this familiar scenario. Sean, where's dinner? Oh, right. It's Monday. Monday's my night to cook. Now, I'm not a bad partner if I forget. I was just simply unaware, and I didn't realize it was my responsibility that night to cook. So what skill is needed? Well, we need external prompts. We need to get awareness out there where we can see it. So if that's calendar cues that reminds us that, hey, dinner's coming up, it's Monday, or maybe a friendly text from your spouse that says, hey, remember, spaghetti and meatballs are tonight. But it's my job, it's my responsibility to set up those cues. Now let's move over to the third question, or the third point, when it was important. Now this is the timing question. Now I want to use a different parenting example here, and that's helping your kids with homework. You know what is important here. You know, they need to do their homework so they can keep up with their grades. And you know it's your job. You're there and you need to help them do it. Now, if the timing isn't clear, you know, it gets pushed to after dinner or before bedtime or whenever the meltdown time is. And we start to get it crammed into some space that's not defined. So what are the skills that are needed so that we know when to act? Well, we need to think about time blocking or predictable routines, stacking those habits of, okay, after dinner, now it is homework time. But we need to be purposeful and have intention with it. And this is a skill that we can develop. Now let's move to point 4, which is how to carry it out. This is the execution question. Do I know the steps involved to carry this out? So let's use our example of bedtime routines. You know what is important here. You know it's your responsibility, and you know when to start the process. But how? What's the process? Well, we know brushing your teeth is part of it, getting your pajamas, reading a bedtime story, and lights out. If how isn't clear, your brain's going to fill in the gap with whatever friction, frustration, or just trying to improvise and get ahead of the chaos. So you need some skills. So we need to keep it simple and repeatable. We need it step by step. You do this and then this. You need to have it so that your kid, if a babysitter is filling in, they know how to instruct them on how the bedtime routine goes. Now, point 5, what stopped you? This is the barrier question. Even if what, that, when, and how are clear, something can still get in the way. Okay, so we want to know what that is. Is that a circumstance? Is that a condition? Is that something outside of your control? Maybe a tired child, a stressful day, or your own emotional state that may push back all the bedtime routine plans that you had. You know, circumstances can get in the way, and those are barriers. They're like a pothole. You need to find a way around. You don't let it stop your journey. Now, this one requires honesty. What got in the way? And so we need to identify some skills when we get to this point, such as problem solving. We need to find a way around it, find a way over it, or through it. We also need a skill called willingness so that we can continue on even when we're finding ourselves with discomfort. Now, this is ACT's signature move. We don't wait until we feel good to start living our values. We take values-based actions alongside whatever thoughts, feelings, and sensations show up. Everything that is within our control, we try to control, but those things that are out, we try to accept and move on. This is where most people quit, and so we need to make sure that we address the barriers so that they don't stop us and we can get around them. In ACT, we ask, can I make room for this and still do what's important here? And this is the secret sauce that often is missing. Now we've come to the center. Why does this matter? This center of the star is your why. And this is the emotional engine that helps you carry out your values into action. So let's look at our parenting example again. Let's look at the rewards and the cost here, okay? If we do something versus if we don't do it. So if we do it, the rewards are a stronger connection with our child, kids who feel safe and secure, a regulated home environment, or a regulated child for the next day. The long-term trust and relationship that's developed by you being present with them during bedtime. Now let's look at the cost if you don't follow through. Well, more chaos is probably inevitable. There might be more guilt. You know, you knew what to do and you didn't do it. There might be more conflict, both internally and externally. There might be feelings of disconnectedness as a parent, that you're not connected to your values and who you want to be. Now, at the center, this pain and this meaning meet. And this is where motivation comes alive. When your why is clear, the other 5 points start to become easier to strengthen. Those skills start to be developed because you have that emotional engine running and revving. Anxiety doesn't have to stop you. Depression doesn't have to stop you. And ADHD doesn't have to stop you. Not knowing which awareness link is missing, that is what stops you. And so this star of awareness reveals those missing links so that we can take action. As we close, let's put this to practice. There's basically 3 phases in learning, and you can go from either of these phases and really benefit. The first phase is reflective learning. And so that's when something happens, like an argument with your spouse, or maybe something didn't go right during your bedtime routine, and you're reflecting back on the night or last night or the last week. And that's great. You can pull some learning out of that reflection. And this star of awareness is really good for that. Then there is reactive learning. And reactive learning is in the moment, you may not handle it right. You may leave your kid's bedroom because you're so stressed out and they're not cooperating. You didn't handle that right, but you you catch yourself after you leave the room. Maybe 2, 3 minutes go by and you realize, man, I'm not living my values here, and you go back in and you try to make it right. So that's great if you can get to a reactive response. Then there is this phase called responsive learning. Now, in responsive learning, this is in the moment. You become aware and you know just what's happening. You start to become aware of the subtleties like anxiety in your body or a thought that this is hopeless or what's the point, and you catch it. You catch it before you make a response. This is where flexibility is really powerful. Now, the aim of ACT is to produce this kind of learning, which is called psychological flexibility. And so you can use the star of awareness for the reflective learning, the reactive learning, and also the responsive learning. But to really take it to the next level, something we'll talk about in the next video, is becoming an observer of your experience. This is where you get really good at separating yourself from your thoughts and feelings and your experiences, and so that you can find that choice. A lot of times we're inflexible and rigid and we just live on autopilot. But becoming an observer is really a powerful skill that'll help you to be able to become more responsive in your learning. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to like or comment or share or subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. I'm going to put a comment and I'll pin it there in the comment section, and I'd love to hear from you throughout the week. And remember, your journey towards a more purposeful and mindful life begins with a single click.